G'day YouTube. Today we're going to be looking at the ever popular AMC-AASD15A Motion Controller by Thanos Motion Electronics, or as it's sometimes referred to as the Thanos Motion Controller. Now, let's take a look at this beauty. Now, it's no secret that I've been a Thanos user for a while now, and with the latest version of his controller a little different to mine, I reached out to see if he would supply me with the current build to review. I didn't pay for this exact unit, and I'm not entirely sure if I'm able to keep it or not, but if you're listening, Thanos, I'll be your best friend. Okay, so let's get into it. Thanos, which is his actual name, mind you, not just an account name from his Marvel's fan page, was born in Greece and is currently living and working in San Diego, California, where he is an engineer in the aerospace manufacturing sector by day, and well, this by night. Thanos built his first motion platform back in 2005 for Microsoft Flight Simulator 98 and kept advancing his hobbyist intentions in the field until 2014, where he really started to focus on building better quality motion controllers using PCBs. But it was 2017 where we would see the launch of his very first Kickstarter for the AMC-AASD15A closed loop controller for both DC motors and AC motors with VFD inverters. At the time, it was very exciting stuff. I remember I wasn't too long into researching and building my very own rig when this came along, and I even funded the Kickstarter myself. I'll admit though, I did have some trouble wrapping my head around it at the time and had some issues getting it to work, but this was mainly due to my lack of knowledge, but also a little bit to do with the lack of a properly detailed manual at the time. I ended up just using Arduino to get my rig working and was going to go back to the Thanos board at a later date when I had to pack up my rig for other reasons, where it would then sit for the next 12 to 18 months. Turns out this may have been the best thing I had done, because then came that AMC-AASD15A, which essentially was a rework of the 1280 USB to include plug-and-play support for the cheap and readily available AASD motor driver combos, which had started to take the DIY free DOS scene by storm. But unlike the other controllers people were using for those ecosystems, it had support for 7 actuators and was easily used by all popular motion software, giving users more flexibility and the option to not have to donate every year to unlock software with no guarantee they might go MIA and leave you stranded one day. Now, this controller isn't just aimed at the 3 and 4 DOF users, it's also aimed at other users like myself, which like to run 6 DOF hexapods as well. Now, the fact that this thing is plug and play is easily its main benefit. A lot of users might be 90% capable of building a motion rig, but when they see the electronics involved, they run for the hills. Now that the hardest thing you have to do is wire up some mains, power tools and drivers, this invites a lot of people to the scene. And when more people come to the scene, you get a larger, more robust and knowledgeable community to help others that follow. With the launch of a nicely detailed manual and a Discord server to go with, I think Thanos has really hit the sweet spot here. No longer are the days of hitting a snag along the way and waiting a couple days for some help on a forum, and in turn losing precious build time. You can get help from hundreds of others, including Thanos himself, usually within the hour. This is an absolute godsend. The next benefit of this setup is the built-in incremental encoders on the motors. Previously, DC motor setups would rely on getting actuator position externally from a potentiometer. This would usually be driven by a belt or gear system. This is problematic in a few ways. If your belt or gear system breaks, then your position feedback holds that last value, but the software keeps telling the motor to move up to reach its target, which will continue to drive your actuator indefinitely and through its end limit, resulting in catastrophic failure. It would also require you to manually try to set each actuator up equally with stroke lengths and pot position, which is fiddly. Now though, every time you turn on the controller, it slowly lowers all actuators until the actuator bottoms out and the driver detects an over-torque condition, which cuts power instantly to avoid damage, but also sets this as your zero position. Now, with some small calculations based on the thread pitch of your ball screw and the amount of travel you've nominated in the controller, it can define its operating travel limits. This leads me to the next major benefit, over torque cutout. As previously stated, when an actuator may run away from you, and then to avoid failure or injury, you would need upper and lower limit switches to cut power as a final failsafe. This setup will detect any over torque events and instantly cut power to the motors, saving your rig from turning into a human meat mixer. By having all this functionality, it is now possible to design safer, more robust and compact actuators that perform better and with a higher level of accuracy. Of course, there are still some situations where you find yourself in trouble and need the added benefit of a much needed e-stop. No rig, in my opinion, should be without one, because as beautiful and wonderful as this DIY scene has become, you still need safety to be your first priority. Nobody wants to lose an arm while zipping around a virtual roller coaster. Save that for the real ones. Now, some other features of this controller are optional remote screen to change settings from the rig, configurable RGB screen, 16-bit resolution, autonomous motion from the PC to safely park and move rig to standby positions, configurable spike filter if the motion software doesn't support it, adjustable stroke up to 2,540 millimeters, adjustable ball screw pitch from 4, 5, 10, 25 millimeters, support for rotary actuators, 200 kHz pulse rate, latency as low as 1 millisecond, adjustable parameters by PC software, rolling average filter for anti-vibration on the servo motor, automatically park the platform if errors come up on the servo drives, additional RJ12 connection for the e-stop, and many, many more. Now, for the nerdy stuff. It doesn't actually have to read the encoder on the servo motor. The Thanos Motion Controller actually creates a model of the motor or actuator in its memory and predicts where the actuator is and should be and moves it to that target position. Of course, it has feedback from the servo motor to know if it's still operational and in a good state. It can detect if you hot plug the servo motor and automatically calibrates it to create this model in the memory. The motion data is 16-bit or 65,535 positions that is spread to the stroke of each actuator, automatically scaling to the ball screw size and the pulse rate. This allows the motor to move slower in small distances or reach full speed to get to far target positions faster. The controller generates 200 kHz pulses for the position targeting system and is transmitted to the servos simultaneously thanks to the hardware pulse buffer that prevents delays in the code loop. The code loop runs from 2,000 times per second with 4 actuators down to 1,000 times per second with 7 actuators, which is pretty impressive for an 8-bit microcontroller. But that wouldn't be possible without assembly machine language directly in the code to take advantage of real hardware functions instead of abstract object language like C. Also, the AMC controller configuration is easily set from the integrated LCD menu and stored in the controller to always remember the attached actuators. It's currently compatible with SimTools, FlyPT, SRS, SimMotion, and Ian 6.BFF, with SRS being the latest addition and in the past couple of months has been getting good results and good integration, like the ability to store different spike filters for each car, etc. I myself mainly use FlyPT, being a hexapod user, nothing compares to it. I found it works nearly flawlessly. It's even got great support now for the SFX 100 users and a whole handful of other rig designs, with plenty more to come. If you haven't heard of FlyPT Mover, then you definitely need to be paying attention to that. But that's a video for another day. Now, let's jump over to the controller and have a look at setting it up and go for a drive. Right, a quick overlook over the AMC controller. It has 7 actuator inputs, 6 on the top, 1 on the side of the board. It's got an RJ12 port at the rear for e-stop. It's got a USB port at the back. It has a e-stop pin header, so you can wire your own custom LEDs and e-stop up. It has your dip switches for various controls. It has your actuator control buttons. It has a menu control knob and an RGB screen, which is color changeable. The actual screen on this version is a remote detachable screen, so you can detach it from the unit and connect it via a DB25 and have this remotely mounted to your rig. So yeah, if you want it the traditional format, you can just plug it in. It also has a DB25 port at the front in case you wanted your cable to come up, or if you've mounted your controller vertically like so, you might want it coming out the front, or it can come out the bottom. I lay mine flat So I'll probably have one coming at the bottom to stop that excess, you know, the excessive force on that connector. Step one, grab yourself a beer. Okay, so the first thing you want to do when you get your AMC controller is to make sure you're running the latest firmware. Now, before you download the firmware, there's actually two editions. One's for the ATmega 1280 and one's for the ATmega 2560. Now, the easiest way to figure out which silicon you've got is to flick your dip switch 1 to the left and power it up, and the screen will tell you if it has a 2560 in the name, then it's a 2560. If it doesn't, it's a 1280. So what you want to do next is plug in the power to the back of the USB. And now I have had issues with the USB cables in the past. When I first got it, I had issues with it dropping out and doing some weird stuff. And I got a better quality cable, and you want to make sure it has the ferrite core around it, like just to help with your ground loops and stuff. Then we want to plug it into the computer. I'll show you a different angle of that, obviously. Okay, so once you plug it in, with your dip switch 1 to the left, your screen will light up. Now, if you notice down the bottom here, it just says AC servo. If you had the 2560, it'll have 2560 down there. So I'm going to go ahead and assume I have the 1280 in this, okay? So now we can basically flick the dip switch back, and if we reset it, it should boot up and show you the version. So I'm version 2.11 fix 5. Now, I'm pretty sure that's the latest. We're going to go and check that anyway. So it's fix 5, right? Now, if we head over to GitHub, this is Tronic GR, which is Thanos' GitHub. Right, we click on the AMC-AASD15A. Now, you can go to latest firmware. We go down, right, so the latest firmware currently is 2.11 fix 5. Now what I'm going to do, I'm going to flash it anyway, just so you know the flashing procedure. Right, so I'm going to download the 1280. And then I'm going to go and I'm going to get the firmware bootloader utility, which is that AVR bud. Now, I'm going to need that as well. All right, now what we're going to do, I'm just going to extract these to the desktop. Oops. Oh, that'll work anyway. All right. Okay, so once you've got your AVR Universal Bootloader open, there's a couple of things we need to change first. So if we go to Option AVR, we want to make sure your flash size is 128K, and COM port, you want to select your COM port. So usually it's the only one showing at the time. So COM 10, and that should be good to go. Now what we want to do is open the hex file, so we'll go load. I'm going to go to where I downloaded it to, open, right, so now we've got this. And now we want to reset the board and to put it into flash mode, basically. And to do that, we've got to remove this little jumper here, which is on the BO. So we're going to remove that. It's a bit tight. Okay, and we're going to reset the board. Right, now then we're going to click the download button. So we go operate, download, and it should connect successfully, and it starts copying. Now, while it's copying over, put the jumper back on, and we wait. Okay, so now the board's flashed, it resets itself, and it should flash the new firmware on startup. Now, It does move pretty quickly, so if you want to check your firmware again, just flick the one across, reset it, and it'll come up and you'll be able to confirm version 2.11 AC Turbo. Right, now I'm going to flick it back. You reset it, it says the same thing on startup here, fix 5, there you go. Right, now we're ready to set up the controller. Right, you can close your AVR UBD. Right, I just had to put it on the desk because pushing these buttons, yeah, it's getting a bit wobbly on that stand. So once you've booted up and you've got your firmware updated, you want to set up your controller to your rig style. So if you select your number of axes, in my case I have a 6 off, so I've got 6 axes. Right, platform check off is normal. Now park position, so when you boot your controller up and it calibrates, this is the position it's going to send the rig to. So usually 0 is good because you want to climb into your rig. So you go in, set it to 0%, and then you set the speed. So 3% is usually, yeah, 3 to 5 is pretty good. All right, so I'm just going to leave that there, and the park delay of 10. Now, standby position is when you connect to your software, so say FlyPT in my instance, it's going to send the rig to the standby position, which 50 is a good one because that's halfway between your actuator stroke, and 5 speeds, not too bad. You can go a bit faster, depends on what speed of your actuators and all that as well. You know, you just got to play around with this. And the timeout's 10 seconds, so I think that's more like if you lose connection with the software, it'll hold that for 10 seconds and then it will go down to park. All right, so I'm just going to leave all that. That's pretty standard. Now, the auto park actuators, just all axis is normal, so you can go through here and change it to 5 actuator, traction, loss and surge, etc. But I think it just put all actuators are the same. For me, it's fine. Now, stroke. Now, this is going to depend on your actuator. So, in my instance, I have a theoretical 350mm limit. Now, I like to give myself a bit of room at the moment. I've been running at 300. I've been meaning to max that out to like the 330 or 340, but I haven't really needed it. Like that extra 20-30mm is not going to make much difference at the moment. I'm upgrading to a 450mm stroke, so I'll just wait for them. So I'm going to set it at 300, and then you can merge it to all the actuators. So you want to do that. It'll do all 6. Now, the lead screw pitch. So this is your ball screw. At the moment, I'm running a 1605, which is 16mm diameter ball screw with a 5mm pitch. Now that means for every 1 revolution of the ball screw, you're going to get 5mm movement. So you can work out your actuator speed. So a 1605 at 3000 RPM is 250mm a second speed. So if you had a 10mm pitch, it would be 500mm a second speed, doubling it. All right, so at the moment I'm running 5mm pitch, so we're going to merge that to all the actuators, no worries. Now, this is if you've got a linear actuator or if you've got like a fold back style, which is on the motors with the gearboxes, you just use fold back. So inline's what I got, merge that, no worries. Now, this is the ratio. Basically, that's for your fold back style, depending on your gearbox ratio, I'm guessing. Now, pulse frequency and pulse filter. Now, what I like to do with this filter is, what it does is actually it smooths your actuator movements out. So if you instead of going like sharp actuator up down, it kind of smooths out that curve. So it just creates a smoother actuator movement. So I like to run mine on like a 1 or a 2. The higher you get, you start to get a bit more docile feel, like the rig becomes real lazy and not as sort of responsive, I guess. So I'm just going to put that on 1 for now, right, and leave all that the same, 200 kilohertz. Now, you can set the function of your kill switch to park, E-stop only, but leave it on park standby. Oops. Oh yeah, E-stops kill power, of course. And you can change your switch type, cool. Now, you got the function of, oh yeah, hold position, park motors, right, we'll just leave it at park motors, that's what I run. Now, button speed, rate, 40, I kind of just leave all this stuff. This is for like your limit switches, if you have limit switches. You can set them on low or high, activate. Spike filter. Now, this is great if the software you're using doesn't have spike filter built in, which, I mean, FlyPT, I'd rather just, the software does the same thing, so you don't really want two spike filters running, sort of, I mean, working against each other in a way, but with this spike filter, it's great if you don't have an option to spike filter, but every game, you'll have to tune it for every game. So you more or less have to find out a figure, say like dirt, you're running at 20,000 filter, and then maybe a set of calls that you're actually down at 10,000. You've got to remember that for each game and change it. Whereas if you set the filters up right in FlyPT, you won't have to worry about this. So I leave that off, and not sure about any of that, to be honest. Spike filter speed is, yep, cool. This is all new. I'm running actually quite an old firmware, and you know, I'm using the whole "if it ain't broke, don't fix it" mentality. So there are a few extra features in here I'm not used to seeing. Rotation offset, default degrees. Now, so you've got your RGB color menu. You've got default colors, custom colors. So you can actually use a menu color, and then you can have a spike color. So when you get a spike filter, you can probably set that to red or something, so you know that you're getting a spike and it's been filtered out. So I'm just going to leave that for now, don't have to play around with that too much. And if you go to the end, it actually tells you your firmware version there, so that's another way to find your firmware version out. Right, now that's pretty simple to set up, really. And the way motion controller works is you plug in the motion controller to your computer via USB. It then connects to motion control software, so like FlyPT, Sim Tools, SRS, and that sort of thing. The actuators themselves plug into this controller. Now, this acts as a bridge between the software and the rig. So basically, your motion software will get all the game data, and it will basically send those commands for each actuator to this controller. This controller then handles all those commands, sends it to your rig, and tells your rig what to do. So it's pretty straightforward. I know a lot of people actually ask that. They're not too sure exactly how the controller fits in the whole scheme of things, and do you need software if you've got this controller? Yes, you definitely still need software to extract the data from the game and then convert it into whatever style rig you've got, convert that data into like a motion profile, I guess, and then that profile talks to the Thanos controller, which in turn talks to the actuators and tells them what to do. So pretty good little setup. Right, now what we're going to do, once that's set up, we're going to go plug the actuators in, and we're going to jump into FlyPT. I'm not going to go too much over that, but there's a few of these settings now you can actually change in the latest FlyPT. So that's pretty handy. I haven't actually played with them yet, because once again, I'm using an old version of FlyPT. So yeah, if it ain't broke, don't fix it. So I'm going to have a look at that for the first time as well, and you'll see that it's actually one of the benefits of this remote screen here, which will detach from here, and you can use a cable to control it from your rig, which is great. But now with FlyPT, most of those settings that you would like to change in here can actually be done through software, which is a good addition. But if you are using something like Sim Tools, then I don't think that can actually do that yet, or at all. So yeah, that's when this controller comes in real handy. But it's also good to have that screen while you're in game, without having to Alt-Tab back and forwards. you know what your rig's doing, what position it's in, if it's actually hit a spike filter, if it's cut out, or if there's any issues with any of your actuators, if it's lost position or whatnot. So I still think it's beneficial having this screen at the rig and being able to make changes and stuff there, rather than jumping in and out of your rig and alt tabbing and all that sort of stuff, right? I'll just do it while I'm set up here. It's probably easier. I'm gonna open FlyPT Mover. Now, we're gonna see if we can change some settings and send it to the controller using software, right? So we've got Mover open. I'm just gonna open a profile, right? We'll set a course that we'll do. Open. All right, so look, if you haven't used FlyPT Mover, this is going to be a little daunting at first, but if we go into our output, which is here, all right, we're going to see this window. Make sure the COM port's the right one, which is 10, all right. Now we should be able to, this is where you get your spike filter range and factor and number of actuators, and you can change a lot of settings in here now. So let's try, we'll update the fields with the controller settings. So it should bring up what the controller's got and show them here. There we go, look, puck speed's 3%, positions at 0, filter levels on 1. So what we're gonna do, we'll try to change the puck speed. Say we'll go to 10%, right? And we'll go save to EEPROM. Now if we go back, oops, there we go, it's changed to 10. So that's good. Let's change it back to say 5. Save. Just refresh that screen and we're at 5. So that's good. Now, control override the stored settings. Yeah, cool. So that's awesome. That's really handy. Now you can change your filter level, which is great because the filter level is one thing I do change from game to game. So, I mean, with your more just road racing, I probably leave it on 1. It's a bit harsher and a bit more feel on the road and stuff. But with big traveling games like Dirt, I'll probably run it at 2. Now, if we just set that to 2, update that. Now it should come across here. And it's on 2. That's good. All right, that's really handy. All right, now another, let's just hide this for now. So in PT Mover, this is kind of like my game profile where you can set your gains for all your surge sway, all your DOFs basically, and these are all your different filters you can run. Now that's a video for another day, but when you get into your PT Mover, I'll just give you a quick rundown. Once you add a rig, these are all the different types of rigs that are available. So you've got anything from like your basic 3 DOF, then you got your 3 DOF with 3 actuators, front or back, then your 3 DOF with 4 actuators, like your SFX 100, I guess. Then you got your 4 and 5 with traction losses and surges and all that sort of stuff. And then you've got a couple, yeah, the double circular hexapod's an interesting one. But say we went to like, okay, 6 DOF, 2 traction loss and surge, 4 linear actuators. Now, it comes up, and it comes up with this nice little page here, which has a picture of the rig, has all this sort of information based on your rigs, like all the distances you've got it set up. So if you go through here, flick through these pages here, it'll tell you which lengths you need to measure and, you know, the actuator travel limits and all this sort of stuff. And it's pretty well set up actually with the pictures, so you know what to do. Then you insert everything here, and then you've basically got your rig set up. So if you look at mine is actually hexapod, like so. Now it tells you to basically measure, you know, your height at 50%, and then half of that's your range and your distance between all joints in between the base of the actuators and everything. This basically sets up a 3D model of your rig, and then you've got this on here, and this shows your rig. So when you're actually playing a game, and if you wanted to test your rig first before actually connecting it to the controller and actually sitting in it and watching your rig potentially break to pieces, you can fiddle with all your pose settings, your limits, so your gains and your filters, and you can play your game in windowed mode, and you can watch this, and as an actuator hits its limit, it'll go red. So you can basically tweak all your settings and push your car in the game to some extreme situations, like if you're going to jump over a jump and then roll left or hit the side of the bank, and your car's going to do all crazy stuff, then you're going to be getting like all your motions. So you're going to get like roll and heave and pitch and yaw and all that sort of thrown in at once. And that's sort of pushing your rig to its absolute limits. And you want to make it so you can go through all those sort of scenarios without your rig actually hitting its limits and going red. Now, ideally, that's if it does go red and it does hit its limits, it's got protection in the software, and it will cut any further sort of cues from the software, and it will actually return back to the game smoothly. So it'll slowly start receiving data again and just catch up to where the current game is at with its motion cues. So it's actually, that's why it's probably not essential to have your spike filters and stuff in the controller setup, because this does a really good job of it on its own. Now, this is pretty technical. I'm not going to go into it in this video because this is about the controller, but basically once you've got your FlyPT open, you go, sorry, I should probably start this from scratch. You want to go add an output, right? And then you want to go Thanos controller. Now Thanos, it'll bring up this board here. You want to choose your rig. Once you've actually got a rig set up like we did before, oops. So this is my rig here, so it has an ID up the top, ID 15. So you want to link this to that rig, so that's ID 15, right? That's the other one I just added before. So we want to go to ID 15. Now this will set up all your output string correctly, and basically when you click connect here, that'll actually connect to the Thanos controller, and that'll set your rig into a standby position. So mine's set to 50%, so your rig will raise up to halfway, ready to start receiving game data. Now once you've loaded the game and you've got the auto connect ticked, once you're actually into a race, it'll start receiving all this data, and all that data gets sent to the Thanos controller based on, oops, wrong one, based on your pose information. So this will tell you how much, heave you're going to send, and it'll tell how much the actuator is going to move and all that sort of stuff. So you can, before you actually connect to Thanos board and actually run your rig, you can just run this and look at your 3D viewer here, kind of like a simulation. So you want to simulate your rig because you've set this up to your actual rig dimensions. So once you've tuned all your pose information here, all your DOFs and your gains, so you're happy that this is staying within its limits, then I'll suggest connecting to your actual rig and going for a test run yourself. Now, a few other little things that are worth pointing out here. You can get a suspension pose, which will give you, basically pulls the suspension data from the game, and it will give you extra heave, basically, based on your suspension movements. And you can have a gear change, so this will add surge to gear changes, right? And all that information is then sent to your Thanos controller, and that then tells the actuators what to do. So I'd suggest just doing some dry runs, doing a simulation, getting all your limits set right. Make sure you're comfortable, that your rig's not getting into any uncomfortable positions, doing any crazy stuff, because if it looks crazy in here and it's going all wonky, then your rig's going to try to do that in real life, and that's what you don't want to do. So back in the day with sim tools, you pretty much had to buckle up, sit in the chair and tune it on the fly. But once you've got a pretty decent tune visually in this 3D viewer, then you can jump in and you can then connect your rig and do an actual live run, and then you can start tweaking these gains even more. And you might sit in the game and realize that your pitch is actually reversed, so you can just put like a minus in the gain and that'll reverse your pitch. So if you're going down a hill and all of a sudden you're leaning back in the chair, well, then you obviously know that your pitch is the wrong way around. So you just throw a minus here and that'll just flip it. Pretty easy stuff. And if you feel that you want a bit more surge, you could just up your gain here and keep going and tweaking it and whatnot. But you got your filters. That's yeah. I'm not even going to go into that right now. So you like your low pass filter, high pass filter, all that sort of shit. So here's a look at the remote control, remote handpiece, and basically I can't find a nice black cable, so this is all I could find in a short time. The one thing I have noticed is the screen's direction this way. Now the cable comes out the top, and for some people it might be a little annoying. So I was hoping to mount it here so I can see everything going on, but then I would like it kind of mounted this way so I could then run the cable along the frame like so and tuck it away nicely. But unfortunately, if you've got it up like this or up here, it just looks a little silly, that's all. So I'm sure it's very simple to add an option in the menu to just invert the screen so it's the right way around, and just maybe invert these buttons here so the left's actually left and up and down, all that sort of stuff. But obviously that's still going to work fine. But yeah, apart from that, on the back you have 4 mounting holes. This is just a 3D printed part. You'll have to get this yourself, I'm guessing, off Thingiverse and print it up, because as far as I'm aware, you don't get any cases with the Thanos unit, just the actual boards themselves. I would probably like to maybe offer an option for them to maybe 3D print you a case for an extra fee, but these days you can jump on 3D Hub, find a 3D printer in your local area if you don't have a 3D printer, and send them the files, and it'd probably only cost you 20 bucks or something to print the cases up, so not a big deal. I did notice one thing which is pretty cool on the side. It actually has e-stop pins. So if you want to run your e-stop and lights all the way back to your rig, which, as we all know, that's one of our biggest hassles, is wire management, cable management. Well, you can have your e-stop mounted fairly close to this and just have it pinned out straight to the controller, which is good to see. I'm using a RJ12 connector, so I would probably pin out an RJ12 port to that and do it that way, but it is good to see. Other than that, I'm going to get this mounted up probably here, and I'll have to tuck the wire somewhere and get it out of the way, but yeah, there's a look at it. Now all you need to do is plug in your actuators into their designated location. Now you also need to plug in your e-stop. I have an e-stop plugged into the RJ12 port. Alternatively, you can use the e-stop header there. There's heaps of instructions on how to wire up lights and your e-stop to the green header there. But I bought the Badger e-stop, so I bought the Badger e-stop, and that's RJ12, so it's great because it just plugs straight in. One less thing I had to build. I've got that many other things I'm building at the moment. Again, your 6 actuators, so that's your AASD drives. They plug in to your servo drivers, which is all down here. They're not turned on yet. I'll turn them on soon. And then Thanos plugs into your computer, and then the drivers, they follow this umbilical shit show and plug into the motors. Now each motor has 2 cables, one for the power, one for the encoder. So It's 12 cables just for the motors. And yeah, it is worth noting that be careful of the cables you bought. These DV25 cables had embossed logos. If you can see this one here, yeah, that Lindy, that's embossed. So when they all sit next to each other, they start to fan out a bit and puts a bit of stress on the connectors. So I had to file a bunch of them down. Yeah, it's a little annoying, but I had no other cables, so had to make do. Just something to be wary of. Now, this cable at the front, that runs down to the screen. And there we go, we have remote control. Beautiful. But yeah, like I said, not a fan of the not being able to turn it upside down. It'd be great if you could just flip the screen and the buttons and turn it upside down, have the cable running at the bottom. I could tuck it along that pole really nicely, but currently I've just cable tied it on there. It's not permanent, it's just for a review, so it just runs down. Anyway, cables, man, I'm sick of that shit. One day I'll clean it up. Okay, so once you've turned on your Thanos controller, you'll see X's. It means it hasn't found any drivers yet, any motors. So basically, once we power on all the drivers, they're going to go into calibration mode, C. They're going to lower slowly until they reach their end stop at the bottom, right? The end stop being, it'll detect over torque situation. It's then going to stop, calibrate that as 0 or home, whatever you want to call it, and then it's going to set it to park, and my park is at 0%, so it's just going to basically leave them where they are, but you'll see them shake a bit. So let's turn the power on now. Calibrated, and then they all go to P for park. Very nice. Now once your actuators are parked, you can actually control them with the Thanos controller just to test out some functions. So if you hit the button once, it should go to standby, traveling. Right, and if you, let's just look up a bit. Oh, you should be able to go. Right. Like so. So with the controller, you can actually hook up 3 LEDs for indications. So like your greens when you're connected, receiving game data, yellow solids when you're in parked, and then you can go to standby and it will flash. Oops. But and go back to park, and you can force it offline by pushing the middle one. But so basically, if you hit the e-stop, that just overwrites everything. Now you don't want to hit the e-stop unless it's absolutely critical, because in the middle of a game, if something goes wrong, you can hit the force offline button, and that'll actually take over the rig from the game, from the FlyPT or whatever motion controller software you're using, and it'll park it. And then you can sort of figure out what's going on, and if everything's bad, just exit the game or whatnot. If you hit the e-stop, that actually turns off all servo drivers. So what happened was I freaked out once. I hit the e-stop instead of force offline, and what happened was the rig was in such a way that when it come crashing down, it actually did some damage to the actuators, because it's still on all funny angles. So if it comes down, one actuator is fully extended, and it comes flying down on that one actuator, all the weight of the rig just goes straight through that actuator, and that's what damaged one of my actuators that time when I did the build video actually. So that's only really in like absolute emergencies. So yeah, try to avoid that if possible. Right, once you got your FlyPT Mover open, you go to your output module. You've already set it up as Thanos. Your COM ports 5 is what I'm on, your rig's selected. And just one last thing is check that your bit output in your actual rig is 16-bit. Alright, so you want 16-bit, that's for the Thanos controller, so that's your 65,000 bits. Alright, so we'll close that. Now if you click connect, the rig should rise up beautifully. Now, I'm not sure if we're getting all this on camera, but the main thing is what's happening on the desktop. We've got, I'm going to leave all this open. We're going to run dirt in a windowed mode, so I've already got that open. Make sure your source, so your game source here, auto connected. I've got the 3D window open. We've got the pose window open. You can see your DOFs work. Might just move this window across a little bit. Alright, now if all goes well, when we connect to this, we can see on the left here we have all the data coming in. Alright. Alright. Now what you can see is, that's pretty rough. Alright, now that's actually quite violent. So what I'm going to do, pause that, that's great, automatically pauses. Let's go to output. I wonder, oh yeah, right, this is the old version. Okay, I'm supposed to be running the new mover so I can change. Now, this is probably a good time to show off this controller because I'm going to force it offline. And I'm going to go to my filtering. I'm going to change my filtering to 2 or 3. I might just try 3. Okay. Put it back online. There we go. So what that's done is that's taken a lot of harshness out of those actuators on the small bumps. Alright, so you can just have a look at the top left there with the poses. You'll see the yaw and the heave, and especially the 3D model. See how that's mimicking my rig. So it's pretty much spot on. I'm just driving around like an idiot at the moment, trying to look at the side of the screen. I can't change. Alright. having an issue with my USBs. I've just upgraded my motherboard and I'm having trouble running all my USB devices. It's kind of a pain in the ass when you get into these simulators. My USB hub isn't performing quite like I hoped. So what I might have to do is put the game into auto so I can change gears and focus on driving, and it's not working. So we'll just go to automatic for now. Right, cool. So this should be able to give you an idea. Trying to hit this jump. Uh-oh. And that would have done some serious damage if the spike filter in the program hadn't kicked in and stopped that from happening. So that's all in your filters. Filter that out. But the Thanos controller can handle all that as well, no worries. So so we can sit here, we'll do a launch. Oh. Right, anyway, there you go. Awesome. Final thoughts. It's easy to get lost in all the forums, researching builds and methods and picking a route you want to go. Then there's the countless hours of constructing such a thing. It's easy to hit a roadblock along the way and lose interest. I've found if anything's going to give you a roadblock, it's the electronics. Since biting the bullet and purchasing 6 new servo motors and a new Thanos controller to revive my project from the dead, I really did not expect things to go so bloody smoothly. And this is in large thanks to this controller. It's the one thing that's just worked and it keeps on working. To be able to come home from work, turn on the rig, auto-calibrate, jump in, press connect on Mover and be racing in under a minute is what dreams are really made of. I really like what the O-Drive guys are doing as well, and all the credit to Silent Chill and Wiki and the rest of them. They really are a nice sleek setup. But when you hear someone post, I've just blown another O-Drive, it really sinks home, to me at least, that perhaps I've made the right choice. I love electronics and I'm always building the latest 3D printer or drone, etc. But time is hard to come by these days and I'd rather be focusing that on rig improvements instead. It's not to say it doesn't have its drawbacks though. The AASD driver this controller was designed for do have the inherent flaw, the good old 10 kHz whine, which can't really be avoided as it's the frequency it sends its signals. But with some game volume and a headset on, I barely even notice it. Some people have tried to soundproof them in boxes and all sorts with varying rates of success. Some people seem to be more susceptible to this frequency while others can't even hear it, or maybe borderline deaf. Sorry, one of you fly. But they are industrial motors and drivers running well under their rated power output and quite simply built to withstand abuse. So I think they will be up to the task for many years to come. Some users also report some EMI issues, but this can be usually solved with good grounding of your equipment and shielded motor cables. I don't have any issues with EMI myself, and I don't have shielded cables, but I do have a larger motor for my direct drive wheel, which I have had some dramas with. None of these actual issues are the actual controller's fault though. Thanos has informed me that he is looking into designing a more home-friendly driver without said noise or EMI issues, lower power rating and a smaller form factor, among a couple other things that I'm not at liberty to discuss. So let's just say the future of the DIY motion sims may still have some tricks up its sleeves for years to come. Put simply, it would have been the best investment I have made throughout my journey, and I would highly recommend this controller to everyone. The after-sales support from Thanos has been amazing, and the Discord community has grown into a wealth of information with all kinds of builds from its users. Just the sheer amount of information and knowledge in that group will be hard to match going forward for any ecosystem. All I can say is, what a time to be alive. Happy simming, and I'll see you in the next one.